Hey, today we're going to go through the Velocity by Customer Dynamics product that's built for WebEx Contact Center in this video. So we're going to dive right into it, try to keep things pretty concise as we go through. The screen we're taking a look at here is the main campaign screen inside of Velocity. To get started though, we're going to jump into and look at contacts. So under the contact section, you've got contact inventory. Your contact inventory is all of the all of the contacts that have been loaded into the system. Velocity is very dynamic, so you can do this via APIs that can be pushed into our system. We can pull them. You can also do a file upload, where we just map a file into contacts, and we can also monitor like an SFTP site. But if I just go ahead and click on one of these contacts, inside the contact, under contact information, you have the standard fields. As you move left to right, you've got custom fields. You can add as many custom fields as you'd like. I'll show that later in the video. And you also have a detailed activity log of all the different call attempts and behavior updates, changes that have happened to a contact in the contact inventory. So from the contact inventory, this is where bulk records go. So if you're uploading hundreds of thousands, millions of records into the tool, they all show up in contact inventory. If I wanted to add one of those custom fields I talked about, that's under this section as well. Simply click on custom fields, and then I have the ability to click and add a new custom field where I give it a name. The field name will be created automatically, and then I choose the type of data that I'm going to be mapping. This is important because in the next section, anything that you put on a contact can be used to segment it into individual lists that you would use for dialing. So we're going to move out of the contact section. We're going to move down under management. Here you have a couple different items you can control. So if I was going to do a manual contact import, which we won't do in this video, I'd simply go to the contact import page, follow the steps of choosing which of the field mapping I want to use, and then uploading a file. If I want to do bulk edits to my contacts, I can do that here, where I grab a rule and describe, okay, I want everybody whose first name contains a T. And then if I want to bulk delete these contacts, I'd use the delete here. If I wanted to make an update to all of these contacts, I simply choose which field I want to update. Say I wanted to update the lead source, and then I choose the value I want to update that to. So I'll update all those contacts at one time. What we're going to move to next, though, is contact segmentation. So contact segmentation is essentially how you create your lists. Inside Velocity, lists are very dynamic, so it really is a true segment of the overall contact inventory. As you can see, I've got a number of these already set up. If I click on my sales team, you can see what creates my sales team is the source is equal to real customer, and the first name contains a T. If I wanted to create one of these brand new, we'll call this one video demo. I'd go to the contact query, choose which of my fields. So if I wanted to grab everyone whose sales team is equal to, I believe the value in there is yes. We'll go back here and see. Yes might not be the right value on that one. We'll use the one like we did before. So video demo, choose contact query, where source is equal to real customer. And it's going to pull back all of my contacts where the source is equal to real customer. If I need to filter that down like you saw in that last segment, I can add additional rules where I change those operators. If I want to add additional groups, I can do that. Inside a group, it allows me to change between or in this section and the and operator here to just get more complex in my filters. These are typically going to be used, again, to segment your contacts. So if I go and I load another 100,000 contacts into the system, any contacts that match an existing segment, they automatically flow into that segment. Same thing applies if I update a contact or I upload a list and there's existing contacts in that list and a field changes on a record, it might be moved out of a segment. Good example for this is in like a collection space. So if somebody has an outstanding balance that's 30 days past due, and then next week they get their contact updated, that balance is now paid, it's not 30 days past due, that will automatically fall out of a segment for balances that are 30 days past due. That's important because it real-time updates into my active campaigns. If I'm using one of these segments, go back to this screen, if I'm using one of these segments in an active campaign and I push new records into the system, contacts that automatically match that segment flow into that campaign and begin the cadence in that campaign. If a contact no longer matches the segment criteria, it automatically stops and is removed from that campaign, regardless if it's in a retry state or a fresh state or any other state in that campaign. It doesn't meet the segment query to be in that campaign anymore, so it'll be removed. As we move down, this is the field mappings. So if I wanted to create new field mappings, if I wanted to click on this one first, which I showed when I clicked on contact import, this is simply creating mappings for different fields and files that I might upload my contacts from. So if I have a file for my sales contacts, these are the field headers in that file. I just simply choose which field I want to map that to. As you can see, I've got multiple in here, so I could have different files for different different field mappings for different files. Next, so we've got campaigns. We're going to run a campaign here in just a moment. First, we're going to go to a communication profile, though. And your profiles really control the backbone of a campaign. This is what controls my cadence, my time zone settings, my dialing ratios, and if I'm using a TCPA compliant human click mode, it's all set in the profile. So I've got a number of profiles that I can choose from while I'm running different campaigns. For this, again, we'll set up a new one. Give it a name. And this is where we can really control how a campaign is going to function. So first, I've got the contact flow. This allows me to set a ratio between fresh contacts and retry contacts. A fresh contact is going to be the first time a contact's dialed in any campaign or sent a text or email, depending on what your cadence is set up to be. A retry is any time that it came back into the campaign. So maybe a voicemail was left or it was a no answer, so that ended up back in the campaign. We also have the ability to sort the overall campaign based on when a contact was loaded. So by default, it's going to be set to first in, first out, which means it's just going to dial records in the order that they're put into a campaign. In a sales type environment, a lot of the times what you want to do is move this to last in, first out, which this orders everything that I'm always calling my newest records first and then working my way to my oldest. And you can see here I can determine that between fresh and between retry contacts. As we move down and we move over here to the right, I can control the dialing ratio and the type of dialing that's done in a campaign. Dynamic is the default, which is going to look at the campaign that's pulling from WebEx and it's going to deliver contacts based on what the WebEx dialer is requesting. I can change that to a static dialing ratio. Allows me to speed up the contacts more so if I need. And then this last option here for click to call, if I turn on the click to call, it makes it so every agent is approving each of their own individual dials. Very similar to like a preview dial or a click to call. The unique aspect here with Velocity, though, is that each agent does have multiple choices they can choose from when they are clicking. We won't go all the way into that today, but that does keep you the most TCPA compliant that you can be because we are not using an automated system to dial. We're also allowing the agents to choose the order of records, which is important in certain states regarding the TCPA. Now, under curfew, this is where I'm going to set the overall time bound of a campaign. You can see by default it's set from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. In Velocity, we look at each contact on an individual basis to determine which time zone it's in. We look at the state, the zip code, and all of the area codes on the phone numbers on the account. So this would mean if the state is in Florida and the zip code's in Florida, and maybe one of their phone numbers has a Florida area code, but the cell phone on the account has an area code in California, that would mean that this contact, based on the curfew here, would only be able to be dialed between 8 a.m. in California or Pacific time, and it would stop being available to dial at 9 p.m. Eastern time in Florida. So it takes the most restrictive approach between those to keep it all within its bounds and compliance. Now, call windows allow you to add exceptions or rules that are specific to contact fields. So I'll show one so you can see what that looks like. A common one would be to use something like state. So if the state is equal to Utah, then we're only going to dial that Monday through Saturday. And we'll say in the state of Utah that they have times dialing from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So now if a contact matches this criteria, it has its specific time window versus using the overall curfew of the campaign. You might also take a specific field if you want to get more unique. So let's go ahead and say if the sales team is equal to true, then we actually only want to dial these ones Monday through Friday, and we want to force it to attempt during the lunch hour. So it's only going to do 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So any contact that has sales team equals to true will be restricted within that time window. And the last and probably the most important in a profile is controlling your cadence across your channels. So you do that by creating a new channel. Velocity does support full omni-channel for outbound, so you can do voice, you can do SMS, and you can do email through the WebEx Contact Center. Starting with voice, if I click on voice, I can say, okay, I want attempt to go out and then wait 2 hours. We'll leave the defaults in here. And we're going to call the phone field. If I add additional custom fields that are a phone type on a contact, I'll have additional fields here. So there's no restriction on the number of phone numbers you can have on a contact. But if I choose phone and add it, how this reads is I'm going to do my first attempt to the phone field, and I'm going to wait 2 hours. After those 2 hours, I want to come in here. I want to change that to 0. We're actually going to make this 1 minute. And we're going to call this cell phone. The reason I specifically did that is because we're going to call the phone, wait 2 hours, call the cell phone, wait 1 minute, and then we're going to send a text. And what this just allows, and then we're going to set a delay for 1 day and 2 hours, and we're going to choose our SMS profile we're going to use. Now what we're doing is blending between voice and SMS. So call the phone field, they don't answer. 2 hours later, call the cell phone. If they don't answer, they're not available, then we'll send a text. 1 minute later, then we're going to wait a day and 2 hours. At this point, I could move to voice again. I could move to SMS. I could move to email. And I can make this cadence as long as I'd like between whichever channels I'd like as well. And a contact will progress through that until they either respond, they call back, they get on phone with an agent, and an agent dispositions it as final, whether successful or a negative disposition. So we'll go ahead and save this so you can see it show up in a couple different places. Next, we're going to show how this all accumulates up into a campaign. So a lot of that is set up for you during the implementation, or an admin will go in and make updates and changes. If I wanted to create a new campaign, I'd come in here to the campaigns, select new campaign, give it a name. Here's where the profile comes in. So this is how I'm going to control what the behavior of the campaign, from curfew to dialing strategy, retries versus fresh contacts, as well as my cadence. In this case, we're going to go ahead and choose one that already existed, our sales-based profile. You can see that new one we just created just a minute before. Now everything in this section is being pulled up from the WebEx Contact Center. These really are all dialing settings from the contact center that you can control in a single place here. So we'll choose which entry point. This is going to tell us which agents are going to receive these calls. We'll choose which of our outbound phone numbers or outdial numbers these calls are going to go out from. And then we can choose between the dialer type. If you have it turned on in your environment, you can also choose the agentless IVR option. We'll leave these remaining settings the same, and we'll move down here into segments. So segments we covered at the beginning of the video. Those are the dynamic lists. So if I come in here and I choose my sales team, I can click add. What this allows is I can dial from multiple lists at a single time. So if I wanted to come in here and add a couple more lists or segments. Now I've got 3 segments that are going to feed into this campaign. If I wanted to change the ratio between those, I can make this 5. What this does is now 5 of every 7 contacts will come from this list, 1 of every 7, and 1 of every 7 from each of those. And then I also have the ability to sort each of those lists individually based on any numeric field that a contact has. So if I wanted to sort this list on the priority and I want to sort it ascending, I can leave that at that. If this field I wanted to sort on priority, but I wanted to sort it descending, and if I had other numeric fields, they'd show up here, and I can sort each one of these lists individually. So as they flow into the campaign, I can truly control the order, really the priority, and the flow of records into a campaign. For our demo, we are just going to call from this one list. So we'll go ahead and delete the other segments for this campaign. We'll click Save. And now I've got this new campaign that's ready to go. I can manually start a campaign by clicking here on Start Campaign. I can also schedule those events to happen. So under the schedule, I have 2 ways that I can schedule events. I can schedule the campaign and its actions. So I can schedule between start, pause, resume, reset, or end a campaign. If I also wanted to move over to segment ratios, so if I still had those remaining segments in this campaign, I could change those list ratios on a scheduled event. This would be an example if I wanted to start a campaign at the beginning of the week with 1 list. I'd have 2 lists in there, one at 1 ratio, the other one starting at 0. And then I could select a day later in the week. Say we're starting on Monday, and then at Wednesday at 8 a.m., I wanted to flip those lists or bring that new list online. I could set a schedule and have that list start to go into the campaign at a scheduled time. So for this case, we're going to go ahead and just manually start this campaign. At this point, the admin side of the house really is complete. We'll go through a number of other features here in just a moment after we show the dialing connection. As an admin, I also have the ability to view campaign stats once a campaign is running. So how many contacts are in there, how many have been completed, the calls that have been placed today, any active calls, meaning calls that have been sent over into the dialer. And then I'll get a view of which ones are in fresh, which ones are in retry, and which ones are available. So which ones are actually in time zone today. Now if I pull up my WebEx Contact Center, and as an agent assigned to that entry point, I make myself available, it's going to start dialing in that predictive fashion that I sent. So we're starting to dial. We'll answer this call. Hello. So as soon as the call is answered, it immediately connects there for the agent. This is where typically you're going to have your screen pop into your CRM. If not, it will give you the information about the contact. So this was a call to Dustin Johnson. I can also see all the past previous history that has happened for this contact. If we end this and we go ahead and say that this payment was made, that was successful, we'll move into the next contact. Hello, this is Tyler. So next contact picks up the phone. Just like before, I see all their information here above, and as well, the contact history for this contact will load below for me. We're going to make ourselves unavailable on lunch. We'll end this call, say we left a voicemail, and then we'll move back into the velocity screen. So that's running the campaign. Really the core pieces of just getting a campaign up and running are pretty simple. You've got contacts that are loaded, you've created your segments to create your list, and you've defined at least one profile for dialing. From there, to cover a few other sections and highlight what these next ones do as we go down, is under digital channels. This is where I'm going to control everything from my SMS and my email templates, under my messaging templates, where I've got SMS, where I've got email, and if I want to create a new template, I do so there. Under the digital profiles, this is where I enable profiles for either SMS or email or both, and then I can also assign what we call to actions. So if I'm creating an SMS template and I want it to include a link that links to a payment, I can turn on a call to action to collect payment through a secure link. I can also make that link schedule a callback, request an immediate callback. We can download files. We could redirect them to another site through the link. We could also give them opt-in and opt-out preferences to those different call to actions. Under this next section, really controls a lot of the regulations using suppression. So you've got a number of different levels of suppression that can be done. So you can do DNC suppression, which are going to be internal lists inside of Velocity. So you can upload a file that you maybe already have. You can add to these files via APIs. You can remove via API. You can manage multiple lists from here. The contact data suppression is going to allow you to create lists very similar to do not call lists, but they're not driven off a phone number typically. These are going to be on any other field on your contact. Most commonly used is something like state. If a certain state gets hit by a hurricane and goes into a state of emergency, you could quickly add a list to Velocity as a whole that says if the state equals Florida, add it to a suppression list. So you don't have to stop or change any of your campaigns. It'll automatically stop calls from going out to that state. You could also use any other field. So if you just have certain fields, or if you want to upload a list of zip codes that you don't want to dial, you could upload a list of zip codes. Really, it's very use case specific on what you can do with the contact data suppression. And then under the suppression profiles, this is where you have a whole list of other options for suppression. So I click on my one in here. You can see here we actually have 5, and we can add an additional 6 that I'll talk about in just a moment. Levels of suppression that can be done. First is based on activity. So if I want to look at each contact and look at the activity that's happened on that contact to set a rule, the example I have here is a common collections one. So if we've made any dials in the last 7 days and that's exceeded 7, then this contact will suppress that attempt. It won't finalize it because of what I've picked up here in the result. If I want to finalize a record because of the suppression, I can do that here, or I can choose to skip the attempt for now, or I can choose to skip this attempt and move it to the next retry cadence. So you have a lot of control here. You can look at all the different activities that we log to build a suppression. If I want to suppress on a specific detail about a point of contact, so a specific type of phone number, whether it's a cell phone or a landline, or if they've opted in or opted out based on a phone number or email, I can set that under point of contact. The REST endpoint is an API call that we could do to an external system, typically a customer CRM, to check before a call goes out to make sure that call still needs to be made. So we might check a balance in a collection state, make sure that they didn't just pay online before a call goes out. In a sales case, make sure that the lead is still in an active state before a call goes out. As a couple examples of what a REST service would be used for. DNC and contact field suppression are just where you set which of these lists that we described before you're going to use. And that sixth one I talked about is we can connect to external providers for state, national DNC scrub, as well as number reassignment database and known litigator type scrubs. So really a lot of options around suppression can be used within Velocity. And that's probably where we'll stop for the recording today, to just give a very high-level overview. If there's any questions, any specific demos around use cases or questions that you have, you can reach out to us directly. Best contact would just be sales@customerdynamics.com. You can also email me directly at tyler@customerdynamics.com for additional questions or a personalized demo of the solution. The connection section that we didn't cover below just is where you put in your authentication to connect to your individual WebEx Contact Center environment. So we pull all the specific details and feed to the right environment. So appreciate you taking the time to watch this today. Hopefully it's something that looks valuable and helpful to you, and we will talk again soon. Thank you.